Good morning, Commissioner,
Morning.
Council, Mr. Taylor. Commissioner, today we have Mr. Rowan Taylor of Tradewind Scientific testifying, and counsel for Mr. Taylor and Tradewind is Robin McKay, who is also here. Mr. Rowan Taylor's father, Leonard Taylor, is the principal of Tradewind and ran the Tradewind business during the relevant time period. However, we've been advised, we're advised that Mr. Leonard Taylor is not available to give evidence due to his health and has retired from the business. The Commission Council is satisfied that Leonard Taylor's health does not permit him to participate, and accordingly we are calling Rowan Taylor, who did also have involvement, as you will hear, with the Tradewind testing and the report. And so with that introduction, if Registrar, if we could have the court reporter affirm Mr. Taylor.
Mr. Taylor, would you raise your right hand, please? Do you affirm the evidence you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Do.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Taylor.
Good morning.
Just to cover some of your background, I understand that you have a Bachelor of Applied Science and Aerospace Engineering from Carleton University. Is that right?
That is correct.
And when did you graduate from there?
That would have been 2010.
And a master's in Fluid Dynamics Engineering from McGill. Is that right?
That is correct.
And when did you obtain that degree?
2013.
Okay. And what is Fluid Dynamics Engineering?
Broadly, just the study of the mechanics of fluids in motion. And of course, there are lots of different fluids, including air, water are the most common one. And that applies to things like aerodynamics.
Okay. And are you a practicing engineer?
I am not.
No? Okay. And I understand that you joined Tradewind Scientific in 2005. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And you were the head office technician from 2005 to 2012?
Yes.
Okay. And you've been the engineering manager and chief technology officer from 2012 to the present, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And how did you were working while you were studying, is that correct?
Correct, on a part-time basis, generally.
Okay. And so your first degree was in 2010 was when you graduated, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And were you full-time, were you, is it the entire time when you began in 2005? I guess that was before you even, was that before you went to Carleton, or was that?
Yes, I think Carleton was 2006 to 2010. And so I'd be working part-time during the academic year and full-time during the summer.
Okay. And as I indicated, your father was the CEO and president of Tradewind, but is no longer actively involved. Does that mean you're functionally the head of the business at this time?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. And how long have you been operating in that capacity?
At least a year and a half at this point.
Okay. And could you describe Tradewind's business generally?
Yeah, absolutely. We do a lot of different things, but largely centered around airport safety and environmental monitoring, both services in that regard and also products, training, and a few other associated things. And we're active all across Canada, the US, and also extensively in Northern Europe as well.
All right. And what does that include?
Right. That includes things such as measuring the friction on airport runways, providing systems to help airports collect and distribute safety-related information. So this can be anything from the conditions during wintertime on the airfield, how much snow, how much ice, that kind of thing, all the way to maintenance type activities, reports of FOD or electrical issues, lights being burnt out, and then training and all really centered around airports and airport safety, in particular, of course, different from airport security.
Okay, and you mentioned, of course, friction testing. Is that something that Tradewind has already done? Has also done on non-airport situations, and particularly on roadways?
Yes, we have done a few test series on non-airport pavements.
Okay. And how many employees does Tradewind have?
Usually about a dozen.
Okay. And when was the business founded?
In 1980.
And in 2013 and 14, did you report to your father, Len Taylor, at that time?
Yes.
And what were your duties, generally speaking, at that time, 2013, 14?
Yeah, at that time I was taking on more and more of the systems and software development management role, in addition to a lot of the data processing for friction reporting, and just generally helping out in all things.
Okay. And how closely did you work with your father?
Very closely.
And being a small company, did you generally know what he was doing and what was going on with him?
In general, yeah, definitely.
And I understand also that part of Tradewind's business is acting as an agent for manufacturers of friction testing equipment.
That is correct. We represent a few different manufacturers, actually.
Okay. And Tradewind sold a grip tester to the company that operates the 407 ETR?
We did.
Okay.
And
And
I guess
can you
that's
describe-
public record.
Yeah. Well, it's in the report.
Okay.
Tradewind report. Could you describe the friction testing equipment that Tradewind both sells and uses?
Sure. So we have a lot of familiarity with two classes and three types of friction testing equipment. So in terms of classes, there's what we call spot measurement devices, which are used to measure friction largely at a point on the surface. And these are done basically for what we call operational friction testing. So typically at airports, this is in the winter when our main concern is about contaminants on the runway, snow, ice, sand, chemical, that sort of thing. And so the spot measurement devices are placed in an inspection vehicle, accelerated to a given speed, and then the inspector slams on the brakes and the wheels are locked. Actually, in fact, ABS is turned off for these tests and measures the deceleration at approximately a point on the runway. That's a spot friction testing device. And
sorry, before you go on, is that the ASTM locked wheel trailer?
no, it is not. No.
Nice.
So in Canada, we work with the de facto standard, which is the TES Instruments Mark III electronic recording decelerometer. But it is the test methodology is indeed locked vehicle wheels in that case.
Okay.
So
I
that
interrupted you. So
no. It's a lot of technical jargon. So that's the spot friction measurement, and we work with, like I say, the TES decel for short. The other class of device is called CFME, so continuous friction measurement equipment, and it's quite different in its operational principle in that the measuring wheel is rotated at slightly slower speed than the vehicle or trailer is traveling, usually in the 10 to 20% slip ratio zone. And we work with two types of devices, the Finley Irvin grip tester, which is quite a small trailer, and then also the broadly called the SFT surface friction tester, which has been built into a range of vehicles and trailers, including Saab's, Volvo's, Volkswagen transporters, and then also a trailer-based version. And we have a lot of familiarity with, represent, and work with all three of those devices, and have for many, many years.
Okay. And typically when non-airport road testing is done, do you know what device is typically used?
Yeah, so with respect to Tradewind, would be exclusively using the CFME devices, so either the grip tester or the SFT type device. At airports, there are two different types of reasons to measure friction. One I mentioned with regards to operational friction tester in the winter with wintertime conditions, where that's your limiting factor from a friction perspective. And then there's the maintenance friction testing, which is done in the summer, usually with nothing on the pavement except for a water film. And that's to kind of measure the health and quality of the pavements. And so for non-airport testing, we have exclusively done the second type, the maintenance friction testing.
Now, we know that if we go actually register to overview document 6, image 71, please. In paragraph 180, we know that on November 6, 2013, Vimy Henderson from Golder Associates contacted Tradewind through its website, and she asked to speak to someone about Hamilton's request for friction testing on its urban highways that year. And had Tradewind ever worked with the city of Hamilton or Golder prior to this?
Not to my knowledge, and the fact that they're reaching out to us through our website is pretty indicative of that.
Okay. And did you have any personal involvement in the arranging of the friction testing?
I did not.
Okay. And Commissioner, I could just for good order, overview document 6, paragraphs 185 to 190 set out the arrangements between Tradewind and Golder that we've heard about. And then 191 and 195 set out the arrangements between Golder and the city, with the testing itself taking place on November 20th, 2013 at paragraph 196. And inquiries already heard, of course, from Dr. Uzorowski and Dr. Henderson with respect to those arrangements. Now, if we could go to images 77 and 78, Registrar. And it's paragraph 196, which, as I indicated, the friction testing took place on November 20th, 2013. Now, could you tell us who Michael Hogarth is? I understand he's a field testing technician.
Yes, at the time he would have been our primary field testing technician for friction measurement.
I see. And did he operate the grip tester on the testing on November 20th, 2013?
Affirmative.
Okay. And was, when you said he was the primary field testing technology, so did he operate the equipment?
Yes.
Right. And just the grip tester or all of your equipment at the time?
The majority of our equipment at that time, yeah.
Okay. And how long had Mr. Hogarth been with Tradewind?
At that time, 2013, had to be at least 10 years, if not a dozen.
Okay. And is he still at Tradewind?
He is not.
When did he leave?
He resigned, I believe it was 2018.
Okay. And do you have any knowledge of anyone from the city or Golder who attended at the friction testing on the day it occurred?
I really don't have any personal knowledge of that, no.
And who did Tradewind view as its client for this project?
Golder.
And are you aware of any direct communication between Tradewind and the city of Hamilton?
I am not.
So to your knowledge, was all Tradewind communications with Golder?
Yes.
On page 78, paragraph 198, you see that on November 21st, the day following the testing, that the reference to Mr. Taylor there is to Leonard Taylor, and Mr. Hogarth wrote what's set out. However, I can tell you that the document, it refers to only Mr. Taylor, but it was to you as well. And it's about the friction testing the prior day. And actually, if we could go to the actual document, it's TRW 71. There we go. So we can just see that we'll go back to it, but the originating email on the 21st, Mr. Hogarth wrote to you. And then the exchange is then also with between Leonard Taylor and Mike Hogarth. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. And your father, after receiving the email from Leonard, if you could expand the top one, please, so we can read it. Great. Mike, thanks for the data and update regarding the Hamilton area road testing. Rowan and I will work through the measurement results and let you know if we need further information to put together the analysis and summary report. I agree that testing crosswalks would take a completely different setup. Glad to hear that GT 081 seems to still be working okay. And if you could then take that down. Is this, could you tell us, before we get into the specifics of the testing and Mr. Hogarth's email to you, how back at that time you and your father and Mr. Hogarth divided the responsibilities with respect to the testing and the test data, processing it, getting it into a report?
Absolutely. Yes. So at the time, like I mentioned, the vast majority of the data collection would have been performed by Mr. Hogarth. And following the data collection, usually within 24, 48 hours, he would email a summary to both myself and Mr. Leonard Taylor of the results and some of the what I call metadata: time, date, temperature, equipment number, that kind of thing. And then it would go into a queue for processing on my end. I was responsible for really all of the data processing before it would then continue up to Mr. Leonard Taylor for the analysis and final report creation.
So Mr. Hogarth would collect the data, provide it to you and your father, and then you would take the data and you process it. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And the graphs and charts that appear in reports, is that your remit, at your job?
Yes.
Okay. And then you're based on that. Once it's put together, your father would do the interpretation and would he write the report itself?
Yes. Yes.
And did that division of work between you and your father evolve at some point over the years prior to your taking over general operation of the business?
It did. I began to do the at least first pass analysis on the let's say smaller or more clear results, leading up to present day where I do the analysis on all of them.
And at that time, though, it's as you described it?
Yes.
214. Okay, thank you. And you indicated that Tradewin mostly is business in terms of friction testing and so forth as airports, and then friction testing is airport runways. How is interpreting data from airport runways different from or similar to interpreting friction test data from roadways?
That is a very interesting question. The data is the data is the data. So when measured with the same test conditions using the same device, but usually the same operator. So I suppose it's really more in the analysis, what you're comparing it to, what standards, if any, are you comparing it to? Do you have historical data to compare patterns? And do you have knowledge of the types of activities or processes that can reduce or increase friction on a roadway versus a runway, for instance?
And for highway runways, airport runways, are there standards to apply the friction test results to?
Yes, there are Transport Canada standards for runways in Canada, FAA standards in the US, and ICAO standards in Europe.
Just depends on the jurisdiction.
It does.
Okay. And it is for the airport friction testing, is this something that's done over a period of years or one-offs? How does that work?
Yeah, so as per Transport Canada Advisory Circular 3012-017 issue 3, the frequency and timing of measurement is actually dictated largely by the results of the previous friction test series. So it's broken down into ranges, and then also things like traffic are factored in. And so in Canada, friction measurement has to be conducted for airports with regularly scheduled passenger traffic at a minimum frequency of every second year, ranging to yearly, ranging to actually monthly in the case of poor results.
Okay. So there's differences in interpretation, as you said. Did your father feel comfortable with his ability to properly interpret and analyze results from grip test or roadway testing?
The results, absolutely, yes.
And how many, if you can estimate, how many roadway test results do you think that you have been involved with?
I
personally
would think it would be less than 5.
Okay. And now that your father is no longer actively involved in the business, do you anticipate Tradewin will be doing further roadway friction testing and analysis?
I mean, I never say never, but I doubt it's in the cards.
Okay. And why is that?
Largely because we're blessed with enough work in the airport domains to keep us occupied.
So you described how many you were involved with. Did your father have more involvement with roadway testing than you had?
He might have done a couple of more earlier.
So you're talking about prior to your involvement in the business?
Yeah. And we've been conducting friction testing in one way or another for about 42 years. So
right.
Done a few things along the way.
So it's fair that prior to your involvement, you're aware that your father had been involved with roadway testing, but you're not sure of the number?
Yeah, and it could be 0.
Now, if we could get back to Mr. Hogarth's email, which is still up on the screen. If you could expand the bottom email there. Thank you. So this is the email on the 13th of November, sorry, 21st of November, 2013. And I think you had indicated that Mr. Hobart typically would set out in his summary emails the some of the information about the testing conditions. Is that right?
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay, so then that's what we see at the top: weather clear, 7 degrees, wind calm, GT081. That's the grip tester.
That's the serial number of the Tradewind-owned grip tester. Yeah.
Okay, and 50 km/h testing. That's the test speed.
Yeah.
And then water flow 10.4 LPM.
Liters per minute, which would equate to a 0.25 millimeter depth.
Okay. And so he writes, tested 17 kilometers of Lincoln Alexander Parkway and Red Hill Valley Parkway, starting at the west end at the overpass of Golf Links Road and finishing at the east end at Barton Street exit.
Mm-hmm.
Red Hill Valley Parkway is the pavement of concern and has the lower friction values. Tested 3 400-meter sections of off/on-ramp. Tested 4 crosswalks at 100 meters. Data very inconclusive, as I could not tell you where the test wheel crossed the paint, and it is not obvious by the graph. Those need to be tested properly with the appropriate device. The one conclusion is that the paint friction is not radically different from the asphalt. The concern with the crosswalks is that a school crossing guard saw 2 kids slip and fall on a rainy day shortly after the crosswalks were painted and registered a complaint. So the last really 5, I guess, sentences there about crosswalks. But so prior to that, we know that Mr. Hogarth tested the Link and the Red Hill Valley Parkway, as well as 3 400-meter ramp sections, right?
Yes.
And then his fourth line, yeah, he wrote, Red Hill Valley Parkway is the pavement of concern and has the lower friction values. Do you know if someone mentioned a concern about the Red Hill Valley Parkway to Mr. Hogarth?
I mean, I don't personally know that, but it certainly reads that way.
You didn't have any further conversation with Mr. Hogarth about this?
No, not that I recall.
Okay. And was this a usual or unusual sort of summary email by Mr. Hogarth?
Relatively usual. I mean, he's providing field notes, metadata for the testing, and anything learned on site or deemed pertinent to the testing.
Okay. And what sort of results would he typically flag? Like, there's certain things that he mentions here. So is it what sort of things would he typically flag?
Yeah, so typically he'd be flagging results that are lower and or surprisingly low, especially for airports, and that might encourage us to process the data on a more priority basis. But yeah, really, it's just a good capture of the things that are learned or seen in the field at the time by the only person who is actually in the field. The rest is just data files in Excel.
And would he typically report if there were difficulties with the testing? Or
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, if there were mechanical issues, or even if parts needed to be replaced prior to or during testing, or if there were any calibration problems.
Okay. So if there was something that he was concerned affected the reliability of the results?
That would have been reported, yes.
Okay. And here on the crosswalks, he seems to be noting issues with that.
Exactly. He's basically saying it's not possible to test. And that makes sense. It's far too short a section to test.
Okay. Excuse me.
There are actually other instruments that can be used for shorter, via pushing instead of towing at 50 kilometers an hour.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we know it wasn't until late January that Tradewind provided the results and the Tradewind report itself. Is that a typical time lag between testing and reporting, or was there something going on at the time that impacted timing of the report?
That is a pretty typical lag. It's about 8 weeks or so. We conduct tests at as many as 50 or 60 airports in Canada across the summer months. So the backlog of analysis and reporting becomes quite real. And especially a test at the end of November, 8 weeks is totally believable and normal.
Okay. Do you recall when you first saw the actual test data? We know that we get into January, we'll look at some emails and so forth in January in a draft report. Do you recall when you first started looking at the data and putting it into the draft?
I don't specifically recall, but it certainly looks like it was around January.
Okay. All right, and if we could go registrar to, excuse me, TRW 92, excuse me, and actually the native format for that, please. This is referred to in overview document 6, paragraph 229, and this is very small. We'll expand it, but this is, as I understand it, the test data, and maybe you could describe what this. It's an Excel document with a number of tabs, and just explain what this document is.
Absolutely, yeah. So the raw data is we load into a proprietary software, which then produces textual summary, which is what we're seeing here on this raw tab. So then those textual summaries of the data runs are simply copied and pasted into this raw tab just in sequence. And you're seeing basically all of the metadata, so date, time, surface name if it's entered, side, length of test, units, jurisdiction, all that good stuff, serial number, test tire, any operators messages, which are collected immediately following the completion of the test run. And then, of course, further down, you get into the actual measurement values of speed and grip number, along with distance.
Okay, so we'll look at it, but as I've read this, what it does is for each test run, whether it be the lanes or the ramps
or a particular
crosswalks,
length,
there's a separate section as you go down, and then it sets out the results for each of those. Is that right?
That is correct, exactly. Each of those sections or test sections is coming from an individual data file, a run file.
Okay, and so at the top here in row 2, there's the date 20 November 13 and the time 10:54. So is that the time of the start of the test run?
That would be the date and time at the start of the test run as programmed into the test computer at the time.
Okay.
And we work in airports, so a lot of time we work in Zulu time, but so you don't necessarily know the time zone it's in.
Okay. Sorry, Zulu time?
UTC.
UTC. Got it. Okay. But is here though? It's time 10:54. Is that 10:54 a.m. Eastern Standard?
There's actually no way to know.
Okay. All right.
But yeah, it's likely either 10:54 a.m. Eastern or 10:54 a.m. Zulu.
Okay.
4 in the afternoon.
All right. Is this appreciating that each individual test is going to be done at a different location, different date and time? Is this the typical way in which the information is generated? The data is then placed into the spreadsheet?
Yeah, completely typical.
Okay. And this first tab is titled raw. And then we've got additional tabs, which are are final, and then which we'll go to briefly, but are those ones that are then processed?
Yeah, some sort of processing, or even not processing, just arrangement has been done in the other tabs. Then, of course, the graphs prepared based on that.
Okay. And so, and here I see number 5, it says surface, row 5 under surfaces as link east RT lane. Is that link eastbound right lane?
That certainly is how I would interpret it, yes.
Okay. And in row 28, it states, if you could maybe expand from row 28 down to the bottom of the page there, register. Not the page, but of the image. Yeah. But if you could expand it from operator message at row 28. Are you able to do that? No, you have to, you got to do it with a native. I see. Okay, that's fine. Thank you. So it's at the operator message, and then row 30, it says link eastbound right weight lane, right wheel path.
Mm-hmm.
So is that, did I understand you correctly, that is that Mr. Hogarth in this case inputting that information at the time of the testing?
Correct. At the time that the test run is completed, the operator is presented with the opportunity to enter in comments. And in this case, indicating what was being tested is very helpful. Is this what's the length of this test run? I think, is this the full 17?
Yeah. So if we just before we do that, I see that the columns are off, but it gives the distance.
Yeah.
And so it's measuring at 100-meter intervals.
Yeah, these are 100-meter averages is what we're seeing here. Yeah.
Right. The average within each segment, because it's continuously measuring.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay. And then I think if I've got it right, because the columns seem to be off, there's the average speed column, which is actually the 1 over from where it's average speed. Is that right?
That is correct.
And then average friction is on the row 39. If we take the very top row, so the speed is 56 on that on the top row 39, and then 0.57. That's the grip reading.
Yeah, affirmative.
And then converted just to 57.
Yeah, so friction is a dimensionless number, and often represented one or both ways, either a value from 0 to 1 or 0 to 100.
Right. Same number. Okay. And then if we scroll down registrar, this is, keep going. This is the entire for that lane, 1,700 meters.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. And then, so stop there, please, register. Thank you. And then it gives an overall average of, and then 51, I think, is that the speed again? The overall average speed?
Yeah.
And then the 0.5 is the overall average grip number.
0.45, yeah.
Right, 0.45, sorry. For the entire stretch. And that includes here the link and the Red Hill Valley Parkway as one continuous test run. Is that right?
Yeah, my understanding is that those two roads kind of are the same stretch of pavement. So yes, yeah, that's for the entire 17-kilometer test section.
Okay. And then this repeats for each of the lanes tested, which we won't go through each of them because the data is then presented later in the report. If we could registrar, we'll scroll down to row 1208, way down. Just pull it. It'll take a long time, and it goes through it. There's the crosswalk data, and 1208 is when we get to the ramps, and actually a little above there to see the what we're talking about. Okay, there we go. So 1182 gives the same date and the later time of 1639. And then it's at 1185, row 1185 says surface Green Hill off. And then the 1188 set test and actual run 400 meters. And then down below, now we go to 1208, and if you could scroll down a bit so we can see the results there, Registrar. There's the operator message, Gren Hill, off-ramp right wheel path.
Yes.
So that's, again, Mr. Hogarth's entering that.
Yes.
Okay, and then it gives the average values there in 100-meter increments.
Correct.
And I see on the right-hand side that the results are for per 100 meters, 51, 48, 68, and 77 in column E.
Yes.
Okay. Now, if we could go to scroll down a bit to row 1299, and I guess a bit above that as well. There we go. That's fine. So this one says, again, that at 1273, same date, 5 p.m. or 1700 hours. And then in row 1276, it says surface Stone Church off, and gives the same sort of information down there below about the tire and the machine and so forth. And then under operator message, it says in row 1299 is operator message, and row 1301 it says Stone Church off ramp right wheel path Red Hill Valley Parkway mix. Again, that's Mr. Hogarth.
That is correct.
Right. And so if we could scroll down a little bit to see the average values. Thank you. Again, there's 100-meter increments for a total of 400 meters and 4 readings. Is that right?
Yes.
And the readings from the 100 through 400 is 38, 40, 33, and 39. And we heard yesterday from Dr. Ludmila Uzorowski that likely this particular ramp was at the Mud Street interchange, the Stone Church off-ramp, and that was where a test strip using the same surface course for the mainline Red Hill Valley Parkway had been placed. And first of all, do you have any personal knowledge of that one way or another?
I do not have any personal knowledge of that.
Okay. Nonetheless, based on what's written here, are you able to interpret what Mr. Hogarth's saying and give us your understanding?
Yeah, I think with a reasonable degree of certainty, looking at this and then looking at a map of the roads in the area, that the Stone Church off-ramp would be the one that curves around and heads south to Stone Church Road, as opposed to the one that heads more eastbound onto the Mud Road or something like that.
Okay, so if we could go to, I don't know if we can keep this up so we don't register, so we don't lose it, and then pull up RHV 930. There we go, and this is exhibit 22. And it's this is where the link bends up into the north into the Red Hill Valley Parkway. If you're going from the left part of the image is west, and then it arcs up north on the Red Hill Valley Parkway. And then there's the red image there. And then at the bottom, the road that's running at the bottom of the image, east-west, more or less east-west there, is Stone Church Road. And Dr. Uzorowski indicated it was likely that the testing, from his understanding, took place on the off-ramp that's marked in red. Is that the one that you were talking about there?
Yeah, that from my understanding is also likely the same one. It's possible it's the other sort of off-ramp or exit, but there it says Lincoln Alexander Parkway as well, heading eastbound. But then I don't know why you'd cut it to only 400 meters. So presumably some direction on site was given.
Okay. And then Stone Church is at the bottom though.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. So yeah.
All right. Okay, you can take that down. If we could just go back to the spreadsheet there, or the Excel sheet, TRW92. Thank you. And if we could go just back up a little bit. That's good. Thank you. Oh, no, little further, sorry, further up to the next one. Yes, perfect there. Thank you. And this is for the other ramp. Again, same date, November, road 1227 of 20 November 13. And it says surface Green Hill on. And then down at row 1253, operator message. And then row 1255, the operator message is Green Hill on ramp, right wheel path. Mix change at 260 meters, last 140 meters, same mix as Red Hill Valley Parkway. And then if you could scroll down a little bit, Registrar. Yeah, so we can just, thank you. So we can see the average values. So again, is that Mr. Hogarth's message that he wrote in at the time that the option is presented to him following the testing?
That is.
Okay. And then under the average values, it shows, again, 400 meters and 100 meter increments, with the results being in row E 60, 60, 52, and 42.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And did you ever discuss with Mr. Hogarth his notes and the source of the information for his notes?
I did not.
Do you know, based on his practices, why he's, if he's putting in a note like that, what he's doing and why?
Yeah, he'd be trying to provide some context and or just field notes. That's a pretty specific one, talking about mixed change at specific test length. So I guess either there's a sign that says mixed changes here, or it's also possible that the pavement was visually very different. Of course, an older pavement is more gray than a newer one. It also reads to me like some information was given to him at site.
Yeah, that's based on, you would assume, on his practices, but not based on an actual discussion you had with him.
Correct. I have no firsthand knowledge in that regard.
Thank you. And okay, if we could go to the next tab, Registrar, final. If we just scroll up to the top, and as I understand it, these are, and correct me if I'm wrong, the results from the lanes and the each of the test runs and the ramps as they then later appear in the Tradewind report. Is that right?
Yeah, this is the processed and organized data, which is used in the graphs.
Okay. And in this instance, and sorry, this is your work then?
This is my work, yes.
Okay. And so if you scroll down a bit there, Registrar, I think that this has then been broken up into this. Keep going. Yeah. I'll let you know when. There we go. Thank you. That's the first 10,000 meters. You've broken it up so that's the link portion as you've demarcated it, and the Red Hill Valley Parkway.
Yes. We split the data into approximately, I think, 10 and 7 kilometers.
Okay. And then named it the Lincoln Alexander for the first, the 10, and Red Hill Valley Parkway for the 7.
Yes. And of course the data was collected, however, in the 17-kilometer continuous run.
Right. And that's what we looked at in the raw data tab.
Exactly.
Okay. And then just briefly, then the next 6 tabs, we go to the next 3rd tab. There's a number of graphs that are visual representations of the data. Is that right?
That is correct. So on the x-axis, we have the airport world we refer to as change. It's just basically meters. In this case, 0 to 10,000. And on the y-axis, we have the grip tester friction number expressed between 0 and 100.
And again, this is your processing of the data?
It is.
And again, just to go over to the next one. Again, Lincoln Alexander Parkway, westbound. Next one. Center, Lincoln Alexander center reference. And the center reference is what?
My understanding is that's a measurement conducted at the center of a lane as opposed to the wheel paths. On airport runways, we do runs at different offsets from center line, usually 3 meters where the narrow body traffic is, 6 meters where the wide bodies, and 15 meters for reference. But of course, it's quite different on roads. The tracks are much narrower.
Right. Okay. And then the next 3 are labeled as RHV, which are the Red Hill Valley Parkway segments of the 7-kilometer segment. Is that right?
Exactly, the 10 to 17 kilometer marks.
Okay. And then the next one, registrar. And the next one. And with the center reference as well. Okay. And for all of these is your work plotting it into the graphs?
Affirmative.
And this is what these graphs then appear in the final report. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we could take that down, registrar. And there's communications between Golder and your father in December 2013, and then early to mid-January, where Golder is asking about the timing of receiving the test results and so forth. But you appear on January 21st, emailing a draft report to your father. And if we could go to overview document 6, image 87, please. And it's paragraph 228. 229, we looked at, that's where the spreadsheet containing the friction data is referred to. But at 228, you emailed your father, Leonard Taylor, a draft friction testing survey summary report for the testing done on November 20th, 2013. And your covering email read, similar overall comments to the SDG one. As I showed you a while back, the 17-kilometer is split between 2 graphs into approximately 10/7 km sections, corresponding to the Lincoln Alexander and Red Hill Valley Parkways, respectively. I put an extra pin on the GM, is that Google Map?
Google Map.
Right, GMap to show this as well. Also note that this is a dual carriageway, so I changed the UK ref line to 48. And so if we could go to Tradewind TRW 43, and that's the email itself, and then as well TRW 43.0001, or it might be just 0.1. Which is the attachment. So can you describe what this says? The document attached is a friction testing survey summary report, Lincoln Alexander, Red Hill Valley Parkways, Hamilton. And can you describe what this is and how you got to that point?
Sure. So this is a amalgamation of the prepared data graphs and tables that we saw there on the Excel sheet, added to some kind of baseline Word report template. Looks like we had done another series not too long before.
Sorry, another series.
Another road test series not too long before that this was based off of. As you can see, it leaves a few things to be entered.
Yeah,
such
no,
as
we'll get
person's
to
name.
No, you're right, and we'll get to that. But just generally speaking, what are you doing to put this together?
So the data, the graphs, the tables, and then the summary information as well. If there's summary tables in the text, and in best case scenario, we've got a report. We have all the standards in and everything like that as well.
Okay.
I'm handing that off for the analysis on Mr. Leonard Taylor's side.
Okay. And if we could go to image 2 of the document on the right. Yeah, thank you. And so it's in the first paragraph, it does refer to the Lincoln, Alexander, and Red Hill Valley Parkways in Hamilton, but then it goes on and seems to be talking about something different.
Correct. Yes.
And that's a different project?
Yes.
Okay. And
more of a template than a draft, I guess, if we're being specific.
Okay. And that's the thing, is that you're taking this from another document and modifying it. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And I think that next one is talking about airport testing. Is that right?
Yes.
That next second paragraph. Okay. And if we go to image 3, under the title friction measurement results, there's the first paragraph refers to the crosswalks. And is that what you wrote specific to this project?
Yes.
Okay. And then after that, though, it seems to then be, again, talking about runways. Is that right?
That does look that way, yes.
Okay. So again, is that from the prior template document?
Yeah, I looking at this, I think there's coming from 2, if not 3 other documents just kind of getting squished together as a basis.
Okay. And then image 4. And on that, it appears it starts off on that page, it's talking about, if I got it right, an airport runway, but then it's talking about roads in York region. Is that right?
It does appear that way, yes.
Okay. And it talks about intersections like Green Lane and Woodbine, Davis and Leslie. And so is that what you're talking about the sort of an amalgam of prior documents?
Yes, yes. I mean, I don't even recognize those road names.
Okay. Well, perhaps is that perhaps a project you weren't involved in?
It could be, yeah.
Right.
York region, yeah.
Well, in your email to your father on the left, is you did write, Len, similar overall comments to the SDG one. What's SDG? Do you know?
I believe that's Stormont, Dundas, Glengarry, if I recall correctly.
Okay, so that's is that a different road road report?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think that's in York region.
Right. No, I agree. Okay. So you don't recall specifically, but that's what it refers to. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. But again, that's not an airport project. Is that right?
No.
And then in your email, you referred to about splitting up the Lincoln, Alexander, the Red Hill Valley Parkway, said I put an extra pin on the Google map to show this as well. And so if we could jump forward, Registrar, to image 12. And the first figure 1 is an image of the grip tester. And then if we could expand figure 2, please. And I see there's 3 pins. There's A at the far left and C at the upper right, which are at the ends of the purple section. And then in the bottom there, there's a pin B. So can you tell us just what you're describing in your email?
Yeah, so I believe we're looking at actually the A to C is a 17-kilometer stretch as measured by our friends at Google. And then with B demarcating the 10-kilometer, 7-kilometer division. And I believe this largely lines up with the operator's notes as well.
Okay.
Runways, of course, are a lot easier to explain where the ends are. So trying to add a little bit of a visual to this one.
Okay. And the pin B, that's at around Pritchard Road. Doesn't quite show on there, but
yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And then in the far west, the link portion, that's is that at Mohawk Road, where it crosses the link? Is that right?
And I can't quite see the name. Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, it appears to be, yeah.
And then in the far north on the Red Hill portion, it ends at Barton Street?
Yes.
All right, and do you recall what the basis was for dividing them between the Red Hill and the link in that particular location?
I don't specifically recall, but I would assume there was something in the operator's notes or the covering email that would have guided on that front.
Now, if we could go to image 14, take that down, Register. Appendix 1, and this also appears in the final report, right?
Correct.
And this is a chart showing Appendix 1, reference grip number data for roads, UK investigatory skidding resistance levels, risk rating for different categories of site. And where did you derive this from and on what basis?
So on a practical matter, this would have been copy and pasted from a previous report. I have come to understand that it's the original source is a UK publication, UK PMS, I think. More specifically, HD 28/94 is where this particular table originates from.
Okay. And
here in the bottom, it says it's courtesy of Finley Irvin, which is the grip tester manufacturer.
Right. And sorry, so you said that you would have copied and pasted it from a prior report?
Correct.
Okay. And at that time, did you have any personal knowledge of the origins and use of that particular chart, aside from taking it from a prior report?
The origins, no. I mean, the use is somewhat self-explanatory.
And was that using this one? Was that on your own initiative or your father's instructions, or do you recall?
I do not specifically recall, but I would imagine there was a discussion about making that table available in the report.
And then if we could go to the next image, 15. We see images 15 through 18, and we'll scroll through them in a second, but am I correct that this is what we looked at in the second tab on the Excel sheets?
It should be identical.
Okay. And this one is Lincoln Alexander Road is Lincoln Alexander Parkway. And it shows on the first page, it shows the chainage. And if you can just expand the top part there, registrar, with the first few lines, it's a little hard to read. Thank you. And so it gives the chainage on the left-hand side in 100-meter increments, and then by column lists each of the lane measurements.
Yeah. Yeah, those would be the right lane, left lane, eastbound, then coming back, westbound, and center reference. Yeah.
Okay. And the R eastbound R, is that the right lane, the outside lane?
Yeah, that would be the right hand, the outside lane. Yeah.
And L is the left hand or inside lane. Okay. And is this a, appreciating there can be different number of lanes and so forth, but is this a typical way of representing the results in a report?
Absolutely, yes.
Right. And same with runways?
Yes.
Okay.
Other than instead of lanes, we're dealing with just offsets.
Okay. And if you could take that down, registrar, and go on to the next page. And here it goes to the 10,000 meters. That's the end of the link portion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, is that yes?
Oh, sorry, affirmative.
Yeah. And then it gives a low at the bottom there. If you expand that, registrar. Low 100-meter section, and then it gives the for each lane, and then it says runway average.
Yeah, so the low 100-meter section is also coming from runways. There's actually different levels requiring corrective action for the runway average as a whole and for 100-meter sections. And with regards to runways, that's usually because of concerns about rubber buildup in the touchdown and threshold areas.
I see.
In this case, yes, runway average means road average.
Got it. You can take that down, registrar. And there aren't any landmarks or anything noted on here, and so right. And so, is the way how does one ascertain the specific location of each 100-meter reading?
That is a good question. So, especially on a 17-kilometer test run such as this, I mean, it's reasonable to assume that things can be shifted a couple hundred meters one way or the other. So really, you have to just go by the start point of the tests and go from there.
Okay, so sorry, when you say it can be shifted by a couple hundred meters one way or the other, sorry, what do you mean by that?
Oh, like over the entire length of the 17-kilometer test section, especially when you're doing 4 different lanes. The start position could easily be 100 meters off coming back the other way, for instance. So all this to say, it's not a super exact location for the individual 100-meter averages, but nor are they completely inaccurate.
Okay, so just to back up, so I guess it depends on what the exact starting point is.
Yes, of the run, of each individual run.
Okay, and just why would they be at different locations, the starting points?
Just due to the dynamic nature of the testing, getting up to speed, getting the water film applied. I don't know what the arrangements were for safety escort and things during the time of this testing, but that's usually a factor as well.
Okay. And so the pin B that we looked at before that you put in the Google map, is that an exact location or demarcation of the for each lane? Or
I would say it's not a super exact demarcation. No, it could easily be a few hundred meters or a couple hundred meters. I don't even know officially what the demarcation point is on those two.
Right, the actual the signs tell you to move from one to the other, right?
Exactly, it's one road, right? I don't know what the border, where the border is.
Okay. All right. If we could take, actually, if we just go to the next image, just to close this off. These are also, again, the charts that appear in the final report.
Affirmative.
Okay. And this one then at image 17 is the Red Hill Valley Parkway portion of it.
Yep.
7 kilometers, and it has the same lanes are set out in the same way, same manner.
Yes.
All right. And as I understand it, the eastbound is because, of course, the highway does change. That's with the starting point being on the link. It's running east and then goes north onto the Red Hill, right?
Yes.
Okay. And correlatively, westbound for the Red Hill it's certainly westbound on the link, but when you look at it on a map, it's primarily southbound on the Red Hill.
Yes, so this would all be referenced there. The data would have been arranged in a way so that the beginning point is always on the link end, on the west end of the link, and the ending point is always on the north end of the RHVP.
Right, and when we were looking at the raw data, it was calculated in the basis of one test run.
Exactly, in the direction of measurement. And certainly with roads, people appreciate if you go in the direction of travel.
Right. Okay, take that down, registrar, and then just go to the next page. Thank you, and expand the bottom bit. Thank you. Again, the same low 100-meter section for each lane, and the runway average, which, as you mentioned, is the lane average, right?
Affirmative.
Take that down, please. If we could go, registrar, to overview document 6, image 87. This is, I just want to place something in time so we get on to another topic. So in paragraphs 230 and 231, these are emails from Dr. Uzorowski of Golder on January 24th, 2014 to your father, Len Taylor, asking for the friction testing results and indicating that his client needs a comparison of friction numbers on the Red Hill Valley Parkway in Hamilton from 2007 and 2013. I summarized 2007 and need the numbers for 2013. He needs my summary before noon. Could you send 2013 numbers to me? And then if we could just go to image 93. At paragraph 243, if you could expand that for us, registrar. Mr. Taylor, which again here refers to your father, on January 26th, 2 days later, and this is a Sunday, January 26th, 2014, he writes to Dr. Uzorowski, and this is just after he had sent him the trade wind report earlier that day. And he says, as you will have noted, the data analysis and report for this project has now been completed. I am sorry for the delays in getting this to you and trust that the summary numbers that were given to you by Rowan on Friday were sufficient for your meeting. Now, if we could go to take that down, registrar, and go back to 88, 89, images 88 and 89. And this is back to January 24th at 11:44 a.m. So after the two earlier emails that I took you to your father requesting the information, Dr. Uzorowski emails Mr. Gary Moore at the City of Hamilton under the subject line friction numbers on RHVP. And if you could expand the email itself on the 2 pages, please, registrar. And again, you're not copied on this, it's just to place it in time for you. You'll see in the bottom of the first expansion there, he was writing about the friction numbers. In 2013, the friction numbers were measured on the RHVP in both directions, and he gives them the numbers by lane. So do you recall having a discussion with Dr. Uzorowski and providing him with numbers from the trade wind friction testing?
I do not specifically recall that, but looking at the emails around that time, I don't really see how he could have gotten the numbers any other way.
Okay, and your dad referred to you having made that.
Exactly.
Okay, so you don't have any specific, you actually don't recall it, but.
I don't, but it's pretty reasonable to assume looking at the things
Okay.
around there.
All right, and did you ever meet Dr. Uzorowski?
I believe we met at some trade shows or conferences over the years.
Okay. And if you, in providing the numbers to him, what would you have told? What would you have told him? Would you have provided any interpretation on it?
Definitely no interpretation, and that's, I mean, the numbers, they are the averages, but that's leaving out a lot of context. So it is somewhat surprising as well that I would have communicated or would have agreed to communicate, but.
Okay. But if your father asked you to, you would have done so, right? Exactly.
And judging by the urgency of Ludomir's emails, I wonder if that might have played a role.
Okay. And when you say that it's leaving out a lot of context with the averages, what do you mean by that?
I mean, everything, right? The test date, the equipment, the locations, the division of the lanes, the average, the minimums, the comparison with the link, everything. It's just the averages.
All right. And just in terms of the lanes themselves, Dr. Uzorowski refers to them as southbound and northbound, and we were just talking about. Do you have any insight as to what information you would have provided to him about the lanes themselves?
I mean, I guess, is he referring specifically to the RHVP portion of the test data?
Yes.
And do those averages agree with those in the tables of the reports?
Well, here's the thing. It turns out that they are reversed, so that what's southbound actually should be northbound.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So do you have? I appreciate you don't recall the conversation, but do you have any insight into how you would have communicated the information to him?
I mean, I don't think we use southbound and northbound language in the report or the table, so I think it would be more likely to have been communicated in terms of right lane, right wheel, left lane, left wheel. Yeah.
But again, you don't have a specific
I
record.
do not. I do not.
And also, he reports it as average FN numbers. Is that how you would reported them to him? Is that your kind of language?
I believe it would have been more likely to use GN or grip number or just a generic friction. these acronyms and ways of talking about friction can mean slightly different things depending on the context.
And in his email to Mr. Moore, Dr. Zarowski refers to friction testing having been conducted by the MTO on the Red Hill in 2007. Did you have any knowledge at the time of that?
I did not.
Okay. And we know that the MTO used an ASTM locked wheel tester device at the time, which I briefly mentioned to you, and which I take it from your answer earlier, you do have some familiarity with?
I'm aware of it in name. Definitely heard about it, but nothing beyond that.
Okay. And from your experience, do you have any knowledge or understanding of how about correlation of results between different measuring devices?
Right. How deep do you want me to go into
Well,
that?
not too deep. We've heard a lot of it. I just want to know what your experience is like, for example, between the different measuring devices that Tradewind uses.
Right. So between, for instance, the grip tester and an SFT type device, that correlation is actually very good. And that's why Transport Canada allows either to be used in reference to the standards. But they use very similar overall test methodologies in terms of the fixed slip ratio. And even there's some dimensional sizing between the size of the test tire versus the speed of tests and water film depth. More broadly, correlating different test methodologies or equipment types is quite challenging. There are a huge number of variables at play, from the trivial like air temperature and road temperature, but through to test tire composition, water film depth, load and drag on the test wheel, whether it's a fixed slip or a locked wheel type test. There's a lot that goes into it, as I'm sure you and everyone are aware. Friction is, unlike mass, not an absolute property, right? It's a property of the interaction between two surfaces in motion and any contaminant or lubricant in between them. So the measurements are very much real, but the way those measurements are conducted is a big part of it.
Okay. And just in Tradewind's practices, with airports, for example, do you switch devices when you're doing the periodic testing over time? Do you use the same device or do you switch devices?
In general, we try to use the same device, or at least same device type for historical patterns. That being said, we've certainly done some tests where we would alternate between a grip tester and an SFT type device, and we're confident in the comparability between those two devices.
Okay. But
going from something like a fixed lock wheel testing to a CFME would be a very different ballgame from a comparison point of view.
Okay. If we take that down, Registrar. And if we could go to image 91. And paragraph 240, as indicated, I was on January 26th, 2014. Thank you, Registrar. Len Taylor emailed Golder, Dr. Henderson and Dr. Zarowski, providing the final Tradewind report. And an introductory first paragraph and an apology for the delay in the last paragraph. In the middle paragraph, he says, you will note that while the average grip number friction levels were generally uniform and comparable to or above the relevant reference levels on the Lincoln Valley Parkway, those from the Red Hill Valley Parkway were considerably below the reference levels and less consistent. Before getting into the specifics of that, is this consistent with your father's practice to provide a summary when he provided a report to a client?
Yes, just a high level sort of key takeaway or abstract, if you will.
Okay. And what would he typically include in his summary or abstract? Like when you say key takeaway, what do you mean? What is that?
Yeah, I mean, the key takeaway, I suppose, is in this kind of testing is the measured results as compared to the relevant standards.
And were you aware was there any confidentiality restrictions that placed on the report by Tradewind?
Not explicitly, but in the business-to-business world, I mean, everything is commercial in confidence, not
right.
to be widely distributed. There's nothing specifically on the report.
Right. Well, that's sort of from your perspective, right? You wouldn't do that, but in terms of the client, were there any restrictions placed on it?
Not certainly not in writing. Okay. It would have been our assumption that it wouldn't be shared widely, but
by shared widely, you mean what, like public?
Like publicly, for instance.
Right. That there was no contractual requirement or anything like that?
No, there was not.
Okay. And having, you're involved and crunched the numbers and assisted with the preparation of the report, do you think your father's summary, does it capture the essence of the report? Is that what you see as the key takeaways?
Definitely, yes. Especially here where we have two sections of roadway being tested on the same day by the same operator with the same equipment under the same test conditions and yielding quite different results. I think that's a really good highlight.
At the same time, it's fair to say that the results tell you that the Red Hill and the Link are different, but not why they're different.
That is correct.
And at the time of the report, were you aware that the Link had been resurfaced in 2011, whereas the Red Hill had not been and had been originally paved in 2007?
No, I don't think I was aware of the status of the pavement.
Okay. Do you have any knowledge of whether your father was?
If he did know, it would have likely shown up in the report. That's certainly something we highlight in our airport reports.
If there had been,
if there had been remediation, repaving, rehabilitation, yeah, that's generally something that comes into play.
Okay. And the report, as we will, when we go to that now at GOL 1113. This is the final report. I see it's got, that's the grip. Is that the grip tester on the cover? Or a version of another machine?
That is a grip tester. I don't think that's our beloved 081 though.
Okay.
Different one.
Is 081 still in service?
Absolutely.
And why do you say it's beloved?
It's been around for a long time. It's early 90s that one was procured.
Okay. So they do last quite a while?
They do, with regular maintenance and care and love.
And if we go to the second image, please. And so you described your respective roles before. Who wrote this is the final report. Who wrote the narrative in the report?
I mean, the 95% would have been Mr. Leonard Taylor. I think there was a couple of sentences that had come from my pre-draft.
Right, the one that you sent before, like for example, reference to the crosswalks.
Exactly, and the where the testing was taking place in the first line there.
Okay. And did you have any part in analyzing the results in this case?
Not beyond the table and graph preparation.
Right. And what about the recommendations?
None whatsoever.
Sorry, none whatsoever?
None whatsoever.
Okay. And do you recall that if you read the report before he sent it to Dr. Uzorowski?
Unlikely before he sent it, given that it was sent out on a Sunday evening.
Okay. And of course, as we've seen from the data, that the testing is done at 50 kilometers an hour or a couple kilometers an hour on either side. And it references in the third last paragraph there, the ASTM 1844 test.
Correct.
Right. And is that, you refer to it, specifies the size of the tire as well?
Yeah, so the ASTM 1844 standard is for the test tire itself, the size, the composition, inflation pressure, and that's the tire used on the grip tester.
Okay. And is that a smooth tire or a rib tire?
That is a smooth tread tire.
Smooth tread. Does that mean no tread?
No tread. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Okay, if we could go to image 3. And we could expand the middle paragraph that says, so it's first talking about the Lincoln Alexander Parkway, and that the values in the outside lane test runs range from approximately 50 to 55. And on the inside lane test runs, the values range from approximately 52 to 60. And indicating that all the readings were above the investigatory level of 48 that was applied. And he refers to, again, this paragraph was written by your father, and as well as the rest of it, except as you've described?
Correct.
He refers to remarkable consistency of the link grip number values, and that the narrow range in friction levels is notable for a single road surface of this length. Do you have any insight into into that comment beyond what's written, or is that based on your father's experience?
That would be based on his experience, but I mean, it is a narrow range for such a long test section of asphalt. There's no doubt about that.
And then if we could take that down, Registrar, and pull up image 4 as well, along with image 3. And if we could expand the bottom paragraph and then the top one of the other image, bottom of the left image and the first paragraph on the image on the right, which are referring to the Red Hill Valley Parkway portion. And your father's pointing out here that the Red Hill numbers were found to generally be well below the referenced investigatory level 2 of 48. And then it says most of the length of this road had grip numbers in the range of 30 to 40. Only a short section, approximately 600 meters in length of the right-hand wheel track of the right-hand outside lanes near the southwest end of the parkway had friction values above the UK investigatory level 2, and then refers to most of the results being between 30 and 40 as well. And then pull that down for 1 second, or just pull that down, please. If you expand the next paragraph that says the data on the paragraph on the right. And here it says the data from all 4 test runs in the wheel path areas of the Red Hill Valley Parkway was quite consistent when subdivided into 100-meter section values, but did show localized variations of 10 to 15 points over relatively short sections. Sorry, relatively short lengths. Do you know what that means?
Hmm.
Because I mean, I know you described that the measurements are reported in 100-meter segments, which is the average of the results continuously taken over the 100 meters. But
yeah, so he's either talking about comparison between different 100-meter sections varying between 10 to 15 points, like in a block in an area, or it could be referring to the underlying more granular data as well.
In your experience with the grip tester, what does variability of the results denote?
It can be a lot of different things. Contaminant, usually rubber, can cause great variability over short lengths. Also, the construction of the pavement too, if there was some different technique applied over different parts of it, direction of paving even can play a role.
And when you talk about contaminants and so forth, is that in rubber, for example, is that based on your runway experience?
Yeah, so when we're talking about maintenance, friction testing, and contaminants affecting results, most of the time we're talking about rubber accumulation on runways in the thresholds and the touchdown areas. But there are other contaminants that will show up from time to time: sand, dust, in a couple of cases pollen. Actually, a pollen drop can significantly reduce the measured friction results.
Take that down, please. Now we see at the bottom of the image on the right, which is still image 4. You pull that up. I think it's cutting off a bit there, Registrar. Am I right or no? Yeah, I think part of that page is cutting off.
It is for me as well.
Yeah, it looks like it's larger than the, if we go to the bottom of that page. Doesn't want to do it.
All right, let me just pull it up again and fix it.
And actually, I want image 4 and 5. Good. Yeah, if you could expand that, and then the top paragraph. Thank you. So this is the ramps that we discussed earlier when we were looking at the raw data tab on the Excel sheet. And the comment operator comments by Mr. Hogarth. And so again, this is, I take it, your having collated that information into a chart that we saw in the draft?
Affirmative, yes.
Okay. And there's an explanation below. It discusses the investigatory level to apply to the ramps. But something that you said earlier was that I think having your exact words was that if there was a difference in the pavement, typically that's something that your father would note. If there was different types of pavement, that sort of thing. Recall saying that, like, the kind of thing that you would that if there was something that affected the results.
If there was knowledge of, for instance, repaving or remediation. Yes.
Would be some, and so
it's relevant, right? Because it can perhaps partly explain results or the difference in results.
Well, right. And so what I'm wondering is we saw Mr. Hogarth's references in the operator comments there to the first the Green Hill on-ramp, and with the last 140 meters indicating that it was the Red Hill mainline mix. And for the Stone Church off-ramp, his comments indicating in the operator's note that it was the exact wording, but that it was the Red Hill Valley mix as well for that portion. But there's no reference to that here.
No, I don't think there is. So I don't know if it was considered and left out or not considered.
Okay. You can take that down, Registrar. And sorry, before I went on to that, I asked you about the variability of grip tester results, and you mentioned contaminants in particular, but you also talked about construction of the pavement too, or different techniques applied over different parts of it.
And wear as well is a big one, both on runways and presumably roads as well.
Sorry, the wear being?
Wear from traffic, from the weight of aircraft or vehicles actually polishing the surface.
Right. So you mean the amount of traffic on the road, or for a runway, the volume of aircraft?
Yes, absolutely. And the type of aggregate used in the asphalt, how hard it is, affects the wear rate as well. We've seen some runways that become polished like a marble countertop from the wear because the aggregate is soft.
Okay. If we go to image 6, and actually we 6 and 7, when we pull them both up. So these are sort of iterations of the same graph that we looked at on the Excel sheets. Is that right?
Yes. So this is right lane, right wheel, left lane, left wheel for the two. Yeah. So this is two continuous test runs, then divided.
Right. And right. So this is when you say continuous. So if you start on the left, that is going from the far western end of the link, all the way through. Then on the right image to the red, where the demarcation point that you indicated between the Red Hill and the link, and then on the right image is the continuation on the Red Hill. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
And for both of these, the direction of measurement would have been in that direction as well. Yeah, because we're doing the eastbound. Yeah.
Right, eastbound and then northbound.
Yeah.
But yes.
Yeah, I can see the confusion.
Okay. And then there we see on the right-hand image, that's the what's referred to in the report is the 500 to 600 meters of the Red Hill portion on the outside lane that was similar to the link values.
It's quite striking, that particular one, because yes, it certainly looks more like a continuation of the link surface as compared to the left lane one.
Right, and that's again, you don't know what the surface pavement was or the surface mix, but that's something that you infer from the results. Is that right?
That would be reasonable to infer from these results, yes.
Okay. And then if we could pull up images 8 and 9. And so this is the westbound readings for both lanes, right?
That is westbound, exactly. So in this case, well, south and westbound. So it would have been recorded from the 17-kilometer mark towards the 0 mark.
Okay, and so in that respect, they would have started at the northern portion of or far eastern portion, but the northern portion of the Red Hill Valley Parkway and then on to the link. Is that right?
I mean, I don't know 100%, but that's very logical to assume.
Okay.
Otherwise, I suppose they would have had to close the road.
Right. And again, this is the same continuous reading between the two?
Yes.
And again, we see on the right-hand image, we see the approximately 600 meters which are similar to the link portion readings, and then dropping off after that.
Yes, which is also the outer lane.
Yeah.
There's also a bit of a steady offset between the left and the right lane here too.
Sorry, a steady offset?
Like about a 5.8 point offset between those two, which is interesting as well.
Sorry, do you mean
between the two lanes? Between the two lanes on the link.
Right. And that can reflect, one is the outside lane, the right lane is the outside lane, right?
Yes.
Which would typically have higher traffic volumes, or is that something that you?
I mean, I can't really comment on that, but
okay. Okay. And then image 10 and 11, if we pull those up. And so this is the center reference for, again, the link on the left and the Red Hill portions on the right. And again, is this the same continuous reading from left to right?
This would be, yes. And I don't recall there, I think it was mentioned there for which lane it was conducted in.
I believe it was on the outside lane. So if we go to I believe it will go back to it, but it says it's in image 4. It says that the grip texture measurements from the center of lane reference test run on the outside lane.
Perfect.
Between the okay.
So we're seeing that same approximately 600 meter section there.
Right. On the outside lane.
Which is consistent with the right-hand wheel path of the right-hand lane as well.
Right. And there, yeah, the reference is there with the register pulled off in the middle paragraph.
Oh, perfect.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and if we go to image 14, is the same Appendix 1 that we talked about from the draft, from the UK investigatory skidding resistance levels.
Yes, I believe it's unchanged.
And the grip number of 48, I think you had indicated that it was, the report indicates that it was for dual carriageway.
Yes, which is a very British term for
It is.
divided highway.
It is. What about a motorway? What's the difference? Do you know? It gives the same rating. It gives the same.
No, I guess the motorway is the M class roads.
Okay. But is it, from your reaction, it's fair to say you're not sure?
I'm not really sure, no.
Okay.
I mean, presumably single carriageway is like a 2-lane divided road.
Right. Would you have gotten direction from your father on that? Do you know?
I might have.
Okay. All right. And then just to go to images 15 and 16. Sorry, yeah, 15, 16. Yeah. Very, very small, but these are the, on these pages, the Lincoln Alexander detailed results from 0 to 10,000 meters.
Okay.
And again, these are the same ones that we looked at earlier. Is that right in the draft?
Yes, I would imagine they're identical.
And the next two images, Registrar, 17 and 18. And then this is the Red Hill, the correlative Red Hill portion from 10,000 to 1,700 meters. We go back to image 13. And pull out the the first and second paragraphs. Yeah. Conclusions and recommendations. Did you have any part in formulating the recommendation?
I did not.
Okay. Did you have any discussion with your father about the recommendations that you recall?
Not to my recollection.
Okay. And after setting out the results, in the last sentence there, it says, we recommend a more detailed investigation be conducted and possible remedial action be considered to enhance surface texture and friction characteristics of the Red Hill Valley Parkway based on the friction measurements recorded in the current survey. And do you know the basis for his recommendation?
I would imagine the basis is on the measured results in comparison with the UK standards. As noted in the report, we're not aware of any Canadian friction standards for roads. And I'm sure partly informed by our knowledge of the standards for runways here in Canada. Those results are concerningly low.
But it's not a runway.
It is not. No, I guess you could make the argument that less friction is required on roadways as compared to runways.
But say your father did have, as you indicated, some experience with roadways.
Yes.
And what sort of remedial action might be contemplated there? Again, if you know.
Yeah, so that really depends on the underlying cause of the low recorded results. In the case of rubber deposits, you have two main methods available to remove the rubber. One via chemical application and essentially dissolve and sweep away the rubber. The other via actual just mechanical brushing it away, versus if it's a texture, micro texture, macro texture polishing type issue that's causing the reduction. Generally, It's called shot blasting, where little steel balls are fired at the pavement to actually chip it away and try and recover the macro texture. Those are the most common methods available.
And that, again, you're speaking about runways.
Yes. I would assume that similar techniques would be applicable to roadways. And I mean, I suppose resurfacing is also an option.
Right.
Grooving, actually, yeah. There's on runways occasionally, especially recently, grooving is another approach that has been taken.
That's where they're actually,
diamond cutting grooves. Yeah.
Diamond grinding, is that?
Diamond grinding, yeah. And I mean, that will drastically improve the drainage properties for sure. And sort of the macro texture, but even like more than macro, because they're usually about an inch apart or so.
And what about, do you know what he meant by a more detailed investigation?
Not specifically, but whether that be ongoing or frequent, more frequent, or measurements, all the way through to what is the actual problem here? Is it the pavement? Is it the wear? Is it the contamination? Yeah.
Commissioner, it is, I'm just going to move on to Golder report. It's just before 11:30. Would this be a good time for our morning break?
Yeah, why don't we take our break? We'll stand adjourned until 11:45.
I wonder if I could just have the breakout room for council, just so we could canvass time for examinations. Thank you. We are back. Mr. Taylor, we know that Golder, just to put some context for you, sent the Tradewind report to the City of Hamilton as an appendix to a draft report by Golder. And in the inquiry, we generally call it the Golder report. And then the entire Golder report, including the Tradewind report appended to it, was watermarked with as draft. Did you know, first of all, that Golder was using the Tradewind report as part of a broader analysis? Is that something you had any appreciation of?
I don't believe I knew, and it probably we didn't specifically know it was going to be copy pasted into a different report going to the next person in the chain.
Okay, when you say we, you mean your father in that case?
Yeah, we at Tradewind.
Okay. Do you know if there was any appreciation that it was going to be marked as draft? We've heard that it was an error that it was marked as draft, but do you have any knowledge of that?
Yeah, I don't, and also I doubt that we did. And furthermore, upon being emailed on Sunday, the 24th of January, it was by no means a draft from our point of view. It's very rare that we would ever modify after distribution to the client.
It was a final report?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And it was actually the 26th.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. Do you recall when you first became aware of the Golder report?
Of the Golder report, that's pretty recently through this inquiry process.
Through the inquiry process.
Yeah.
Okay. And if we could go to the Golder report, it's at GOL 2981. And if we go to image 10, please. And so in section 5.0, friction testing, maybe you could expand that whole section for us there, Registrar. Thank you. So here's the summary, and the summary numbers are the same ones that were in the email we looked at earlier. You've had a chance to review this in the context of the inquiry?
Yes, I have.
Okay. And do you have any views on the summary in relation to the Tradewind report?
It's fairly short.
Yeah.
In my view, leaving out quite a bit of context. I guess there's an argument if it's in as an appendix, one can also just read the appendix. And then furthermore, we've got a different naming convention for the lanes, which perhaps that's a more road kind of naming, but I wouldn't immediately know which one is lane 1 and which one is lane 2. And of course, we get back to this north, east, west, south issue again as well.
Right.
But if the whole report is included as an appendix, perhaps that's standard practice.
Okay.
This part.
All right. What about there is no reference to there's a reference to the link in the testing, but it doesn't actually provide those results. Do you have a view about that?
Yeah, that is curious. I mean, I've been a bit curious. The original work we were contracted to do, why were both pieces of payment tested? It was only the RHVP of actual interest. Were we testing the other as a comparison, or that's been a curious one as well? Because, like you say, it's sort of missing half the data from our point of view, from the data we collected.
Right. Now, in fairness, this is the Golder report is about the Red Hill itself.
Right. So I guess then the question is, why was data collected on the link?
Okay. Okay, if we could go to Golder GOL 4370. And this is the Tradewind invoice to Golder, dated January 24th, 2014 for $4,925 plus tax for the testing in the Tradewind report. And were there any further payments received from Golder by Tradewind in respect of this work?
We did a review of the accounting system and did not find any other payments, no,
Okay.
or invoices.
And has Tradewind been contracted by Golder since then?
Not to my knowledge.
Take that down, Registrar. And if we could go to overview document 7. Different overview document 7 and image 82, please. And paragraph 257, if you could expand that for us. And so in this one, on December 17, 2015, Dr. Uzorowski responded to your father's January 26, 2014 email with which he sent the Tradewind report originally. And he asked questions about the standards and for the testing, and if there's any correlation between GTN, grip tester number, and FN, friction number, and indicated that the GTN limits you gave in the report are from the UK. Do you know what limits are typically used in the US or Canada? And you were copied on this email. It doesn't mention it in the overview document, but I can tell you that you were copied.
And this is about 23 months after the report was sent, right?
No, it's under 2 years. So this is December 17, 2015. So I guess it's 20. Oh, sorry, you said 23 months. 23. Yeah, 23. Your math is better than mine because you're an engineer and I'm not. Or rather, I'm definitely not an engineer. So
I mean, me neither.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I took it back. Okay, so you did receive this, but prior to this, between the sending of the Tradewind report and the receipt of this email, do you recall or know if there were any communications with Golder in the interim period?
I do not know or recall. I mean, Len used to get a huge number of emails, but no, I don't believe so.
Okay, we don't have any record of any communications. Just to say if you were aware of any calls or anything of that nature.
I'm not.
Okay.
It's a pretty specific question to be asking almost 2 years later.
Fair. To your knowledge, until this email, did Golder ever raise any questions about comparing friction testing methodologies or standards to apply to the testing?
And not to my knowledge, no.
And did you yourself ever discuss these issues with Dr. Uzorowski following this email?
No.
And we do have emails later. If we could go to images 113 and 114. Paragraphs 361 through 364, you don't have to expand them. There's communications between on February 19th through the 22nd. There are emails between your father and Dr. Uzorowski. Dr. Uzorowski follows up from his earlier email, and then there's the back and forth. Do you recall if you were aware of these at the time?
The exchange, I mean, I don't specifically recall the exchange.
I don't think I'm going to check. I don't think you were copied on those emails, but I don't want to misspeak. So just give me one moment.
Comparison between grip tester and E274 locked wheel friction measurement trailer. Interesting.
Yeah, so you're not copied on those
Okay.
emails.
Yeah.
Wondering if
Too
you
bad.
were-
I'd like to see that document.
Okay. And do you recall any discussions with your father about those at the time? Did he make you
I
aware?
don't. No.
Okay. And as you will be aware through the inquiry, how did you learn that the city had concerns about whether the information in the Tradewind report had been appropriately shared?
I mean, exclusively through this inquiry process.
Do you recall when you became aware?
What year was that? Was that late 2018 or
No,
late 2019?
February 2019 was when it came out in the media. Early February.
Okay, yeah,
2019.
yeah.
So is it around that time when
It would,
came?
yeah, around that time, yeah.
Did you learn about it through the media?
Yeah, I think it was a phone call into our office from some media outlet.
Oh, from the press.
Yeah.
Okay. And did anyone at the city contact you or your father about this?
Yes, my understanding is that maybe a couple of weeks after it was in the press, the city auditor had a phone conversation with Mr. Leonard Taylor.
Okay, but you weren't.
I was not party to that, but
okay. You can take those down, Register. And if we could go to RHV 889. So this is a letter dated June 17, 2021, responding to a letter indicated there dated May 31st, 2021 from Rob Senta, our former partner and lead commission counsel. And wrote a letter asking a number of questions, which you then responded to in this letter by repeating the questions and then providing the answers. You recall this letter?
I do. We're getting closer to the present day.
It always helps to be close
It
to,
helps a lot.
or usually does. Okay, and you wrote this letter?
Yes.
Okay. Could we, this isn't not in the overview document, if we could mark this as an exhibit, Commissioner, it would be exhibit 103.
Thank you.
Noted, Council. Thank you.
Thank you. And the questions asked were to respond to some issues arising from the work conducted by SEMA, and specifically a memorandum to Mayor and Council dated February 4th, 2019, and a final report dated May 2020. And understand from your letter that in answering some of these questions, you consulted with the manufacturer of grip tester, which is Findlay Irvine of Scotland.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. And so there's some overlap in the questions. I principally just want to talk about the investigatory level chart that that you and Father used in the Tradewind report to establish the investigatory level of 48. So if we keep this letter up, and then if we could pull up HAM 12842. which is the SEMA February 4th, 2019 memo to mayor and council. If we could go to image 4 of that memo. And it's the last 2 paragraphs of that page, which is what we asked you about in question 1, responded to in your letter. So, and this is about the reference table showing the threshold levels and where that was from. And then, one second. And the point that SEMA makes is that Tradewind used a different chart than is typically applied. If we go to the next image on the right-hand memo. It's a little, image isn't perfect there, but yeah, thank you. And SEMA says this is a different chart that should be used, and it's the UK PMS table, which for dual carriageway shows a 41 or 47. You see that?
Yes.
Okay. And if we go back to your letter, if we look at image 2, yeah, go to the next image, please. Thanks. And then the top, if we could just expand those last top 3 paragraphs, thank you. And if you could explain it, you could just explain what you ascertained from your discussion with Findlay Irvine and your review.
Absolutely, yes. So in speaking with Findlay Irvine, it looks like the original table in our report comes from the same UK PMS source, but specifically HG 2894, so 1994 is where that comes from. Those numbers that come from. There, at the time the report was created, there had since been an updated version, HG 2804 from 2004, which is my understanding is the ones in the SEMA reports. And so they are similar, but they are not identical.
Right, and the investigatory level is lower.
So yeah, for dual carriageway in the 2004 version, the investigatory level appears to be either 41 or 47, as opposed to the 1994 version, which is 48.
Right.
A little unclear to me, even today, what you're supposed to do with a range when using it as a threshold.
Okay. And were you and your father in 2014 not aware of the more recent 2004 version?
I certainly was not, and I don't believe Glenn was either.
Would Tradewind's recommendations in the Tradewind report have changed in your estimation had you applied the more recent investigatory levels that SEMA identified?
I don't think they would have changed much at all. We tend to analyze data on the more conservative side, so we would have used the 47 number, which is 1 point down, which makes very little difference to the analysis and conclusions.
All right. Well, what if it was the 41?
The 41, I guess you're closer to the thresholds on the RHVP. So yeah, perhaps.
Well, it's still below though.
Still below. It's just less
Not
below,
below.
right? So
yeah. Okay. And does it change what the test results themselves are?
it in no way changes the measured test results.
One moment, please. Thank you very much. I do not have any further questions. So council have indicated that, at least two council, that they have questions, and I'm not sure who wants to go first, as the longer estimates were for Ms. Contractor and for the city and Ms. Roberts. We didn't discuss who was going to go first, so perhaps I think Ms. Contractors was expecting to go longer, so perhaps she could go first.
Certainly. Thank you. Mr. Commissioner, may I proceed?
Yes, please proceed, Ms. Contractor.
Good morning, Mr. Taylor. My name is Donna Contractor. I'm counsel to the City of Hamilton. I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions with respect to some of the matters that Commission Council took you through. And Mr. Registrar, could we please go to TRW 71? And so Commission Council took you to this email from Mr. Hogarth, and Commission Council, I wonder if we can make it a bit bigger. Or just call out the body of the email perhaps. And particularly the email at the bottom. And so this email from Mr. Hogarth to Mr. Leonard Taylor, in which Mr. Hogarth says the Red Hill Valley Parkway is the pavement of concern and has the lower friction values. And I take it from your evidence this morning that you don't recall any further discussions with Mr. Hogarth regarding what he meant by pavement of concern.
I do not know.
And I take it that he may have just been referring to the difference in friction values between the Red Hill and the lake.
Yes, I would say that there are two interpretations there. That is one of them. The other is that he was advised on site that the RHVP was of more concern than the link.
So he was advised on site. Who would have advised him of that?
He may have been. Anybody else who was on site at the time.
I understand. And I take it that you're not aware of any city staff that were on site?
I actually have no idea who else was on site at the time.
You typically, you also stated that typically Mr. Hogarth flags the results that are lower, which may encourage Tradewind to process the data on a more priority basis.
That is correct, yes.
And I believe you stated that an 8-week turnaround time approximately, which is what we see here, is your kind of typical turnaround time.
It's not unusual.
Right. So fair to say that Tradewind did not need to see or did not have any need to prioritize the review of the Red Hill data on a priority basis.
I don't know if it's fair to say we didn't need to, but we certainly don't appear to have prioritized it.
Right. You didn't identify as something that needed to be prioritized at the time.
Or I'm saying we did not appear to prioritize it at the time.
Okay. And you've stated that one of the key findings of the Tradewind report was the difference in friction values between the Red Hill and the link. And I take it that generally speaking, friction values in a roadway decrease over time.
I don't know how much I can comment on friction values on roadways in particular and their trends over time, but certainly that's something that we see in the airport runway data.
Okay. And I understand from your evidence this morning that at the time that Tradewind was preparing the report, and they were not aware that the link was resurfaced in the summer of 2011.
That is my understanding, yes.
And so when Tradewind tested the friction levels on the link, that was just over 2 years after the resurfacing was completed.
Okay.
And the Red Hill, on the other hand, opened in 2007. And so that testing was completed nearly 7 years after it opened. And this morning you stated that knowledge of repaving or remediation of a roadway is important and usually included in your reports because it could help explain the difference in results. And so based on that, is it fair to say that in 2013, the link would be expected to have higher friction levels than the Red Hill, given that it was resurfaced in 2011?
I think that you have to consider a lot of factors there in addition to the age, right? If all else being equal, so that is the same pavement applied in the same conditions, by the same folks with the same traffic levels over the amount of time, then yes, you could draw that conclusion. But there are a lot of variables at play there.
Certainly a lot of variables, and one of those is how recent the roadway was resurfaced, correct?
Yes. And in some cases, a brand new paved job can actually result in decreased friction levels that then improve over the first year or so in service.
Right. And did you understand the link to have a pavement that would have lower friction values that would increase over time?
I don't have any specific understanding in that regard.
Okay. And if we could go to Golder, sorry, I'll add that given that the link was resurfaced 2 years, at least, or almost 2 years before the testing, any kind of early age friction issue wouldn't be contributing to the results at that point.
Yeah, in our experience, that is correct.
Okay. And could we go to GOL 1113, please? And image 6 and 7. Thank you. Commission counsel took you to these graphs and noted the difference in friction values between the Red Hill and Link, and again asked whether it was reasonable to infer that surface mix might help explain some of that difference. And I think you stated that it would be reasonable to infer that. And again, I take it that the fact that the link was resurfaced 2 years prior to the time of testing versus 7 years for the Red Hill, that could also help explain the difference, or at least help explain some of the difference.
It could. Of course, it's also possible that a piece of pavement is resurfaced with pavement with worse friction characteristics, right? It's not a guarantee that they're better than what's already there.
Right. And do you have any reason to believe that the link was resurfaced in 2011 with pavement with worse friction characteristics?
I do not.
I understand that generally Tradewind does friction testing in the summer through to October. Does that sound right?
Yes. And
you stated as well that contaminants on the road could throw off the friction testing results.
Absolutely.
Would that include brine or other materials that are laid down on the road as a preventative winter control measure?
Yeah. I mean, a liquid brine, if it's of a substantial depth, could certainly affect the results. Even residue from the salt from the brine could be foreseen to affect the results.
Thank you. And could we please go to TRW 36? So this is the initial email from Dr. Henderson to Tradewind requesting friction testing on the Red Hill and the Link. And I appreciate that you're not on this email, but just wanted to pull it up so you have a sense of the initial communication. Do you recall whether Golder at any point advised Tradewind that the reason that the city wanted to conduct friction testing was as a result of comments from the police that the slipperiness of the pavement was contributing to collisions?
I do not have any knowledge or recollection of that. No.
And did anyone at Tradewind advise you, your father, for example, that they were given that information from Golder?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. And Mr. Taylor, I take it that repeat friction testing is usual in assessing the friction patterns over time.
Yes, and I believe I alluded to that earlier in my testimony about the frequency, at least for airports, is definitely a one shot. It tells you, it gives you data, but it doesn't help you at all with trends.
Right, and so that comparative information provides important data about how the road is doing from a friction perspective.
The pavement, yeah, definitely.
Right, and then we can go to it if you'd like, but we know that the recommendation of the Tradewind report with respect to the Red Hill was that a more detailed investigation be completed.
That is correct.
Yes. And am I correct that one such type of investigation would be to compare the friction testing data over time?
That would definitely be one of the arms, yes.
Okay. And if we go to Tradewind 3.6, which we are at. Sorry, I have the wrong reference, but I'll ask you, and if you need to go to the email, we can certainly do that. And Commission Counsel took you to correspondence from Dr. Uzarowski to Mr. Leonard Taylor prior to the Tradewind report having been issued and provided to the client, in which he stated that his client, the city, was looking for a comparison between the friction testing data that was done in 2007 and the testing that Tradewind did in 2013. And at that point, when Dr. Uzarowski sends your father the email, the Tradewind report is not finalized. And I take it that no one from Golder provided Tradewind with the 2007 testing data to compare it to the Tradewind data.
No, and I don't think we've seen it as yet.
Okay. And if the city understood that the 2013 results were higher than the 2007 results, that would be, as you agreed to earlier, that would be part of the investigation, the additional investigation that the report recommends.
Yes, I mean, that's how many years? That's 6 years. Even before you get into the different test methodologies, but it's a piece of the puzzle for sure.
Okay. And is it fair to say that based on that comparison, they may come to the conclusion that additional remedial measures may not be required, that could be a reasonable conclusion based on that comparison?
Who is they in this context?
The city.
The city. I mean, we can't really say what the city should or should not be concluding.
Is that a reasonable conclusion? If the 2013 results they understood were higher than the 2007 results, the recommendation of the report is to do further investigation. And you've told me comparison is one such investigation.
Yeah, it's one of a few different elements of further investigation.
Right. And right that the report doesn't identify specific kinds of investigations.
It does not, no, because it could range from further measurements to an investigation of the root cause for the low friction values.
Right. And am I correct that Golder did not ask Tradewind to do any additional follow-up friction testing on the Red Hill?
That is my understanding.
And do you know whether Tradewind ever contacted Golder just to follow up to see whether they needed any more friction testing?
I do not know, but knowing us, I doubt it.
Okay. I'd like to go to GOL 1113 and to image 13 specifically.
Sorry, Council, do you mind just repeating the doc PD for me?
Certainly, at GOL 1113. And image 13, please. So this is the conclusion and recommendation section, of course, of the Tradewind report. And again, as we discussed earlier, the recommendation with respect to the Red Hill was that a more detailed investigation be completed. And the report does not provide a timeline by which the investigation should be completed. Is that fair?
That is fair.
And that reflects the fact that
friction measurements that are at investigatory levels are not a definitive indication that a location is unsafe. Is that fair?
I think in general, I can't really speak to the safety or lack thereof of a pavement surface.
Certainly, if Tradewind thought that the investigation needed to be done or urgently, or that it was a time-sensitive matter, it would have stated that in the report.
I don't know how we would ascertain the urgency in this case, especially with the lack of standards in Canada to compare to.
Understood. So
for reference, in the airport standards, there are levels at which remedial action must be taken, must be programmed. So there's more of a timeline in that case.
Right. And there being no such timeline here, none was included in the report.
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Commissioner, may I have a moment just to consult my notes?
Absolutely, Ms. Contractor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Those are all my questions. Thanks for your time today.
You're most welcome.
Ms. Roberts, please proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor, I'm Jennifer Roberts. I'm counsel for Goldner. I have a very short series of questions. You mentioned on a couple of occasions contamination on a surface in the form of rubber.
Yes.
And I take it that's something that's experienced on runways in particular?
Yeah, that is one of the highest concerns on runways, especially those that are heavily trafficked. In fact, a normal size aircraft leaves about 1 kilogram of rubber behind on every landing. And obviously you can do the math, that can add up quite quickly.
Got it. So do I interpret from that you would find contamination in the landing zone on a runway?
Correct. They call the touchdown zones just in from the two ends.
Okay, and perhaps it's an obvious point, but just for clarification, I take it that is not an experience that roadways have.
I mean, I would imagine that there would be some rubber deposits, especially around if there were braking zones or acceleration zones or cornering zones, but I would also take it that it's much less of a concern on roadways.
Okay. And in just think of this. Okay, so do you have any experience in testing where contamination on a runway was discovered? Sorry, let me rephrase that. Where contamination on a roadway was something that was observed.
Contamination on a roadway, no, I don't believe we have any specific experience there.
Okay. And particularly contamination in the form of a rubber deposit on a roadway?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
That was short.
Okay. On our break, counsel for Dufferin indicated that they would not have any questions, and counsel for the MTO reserve 5 minutes if necessary. Mr. Saad?
I can confirm the MTO has no further questions, or no questions rather.
Mr. McKay, do you have any questions?
No, I have no questions.
Okay. Thank you. I have, I believe, maybe 3 questions on 2 quick documents. If I could take you, Registrar, if we could go to GOL 1113, which is the Tradewind report. And if we could also pull up TW 92, Tradewind 92. And while we're doing that, Ms. Contractor asked you about whether brine laid down on the road in the context of late season testing and so forth, whether that could affect the results, and you indicated that it could, or even, I think you said even salt residue potentially could have an effect.
Yes, with brine, because if it's in the liquid phase, it could be adding to the film depth, and then if it's evaporated, then you definitely have a fine particulate of the salt. Could definitely affect the results. I mentioned previously, pollen drop actually can affect the friction results as well.
Okay, and in the trade wind report, if we could go to, I believe it is image 17. Let's try that. Oh, it's for registrar. Actually, it's the native document for trade wind 92. Yeah, and go to the raw tab. Great. Okay, and so the first thing is, if you on the document on the left, this is from the trade wind report, and specifically the Red Hill. Okay, let's just stick with that. The Red Hill at the top. If you could expand the top portion. Yeah, great. And I see the temperature is given as 7 degrees.
Yes, that would be the air temperature.
Okay, and it says the same thing for the link portion as well. And then if we go then to the other document, trade wind 92 in the native, please. Yeah, and if we could go to the top of the document. We could go through each of them, but I see in line 19, row 19, it says ice level NA.
Oh, okay.
What's that mean?
That's an FAA thing. I think it's at 0.25 they consider the runway to be below like an ice threshold. But yeah, it's nothing to do with the actual measured or observed ice.
But if there is there any indication in any of the materials for trade wind that there was any ice or residue of a concern in any way?
None that I've seen, no.
Okay.
No, and I mean, +7 is pretty safe. There's not going to be any ice.
Yeah. Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you very much.
Okay. Mr. Taylor, thank you very much for attending the inquiry.
My pleasure.
You're excused. I don't think we have anything else we have to address with council today. That being the case, we'll stand adjourned until Monday morning at 9:30. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And
Thank
have a
you.
good weekend all.
Have a good weekend. Good luck with the inquiry.